Comic Book Savant, episode 420. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, we're going to be continuing with the series of countdown episodes I've been doing recently. We covered my favorite artists, my favorite writers, and this episode is going to be still in that realm or that theme, and this is going to be my favorite creative teams. But before we get into the episode, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, you're looking for more comic book related content to listen to on your daily commute and so forth, go over to the Comics Podcast Network over at comicspodcast.com. There are literally hundreds of different podcasts listed there, from a single person podcast like myself to multi-person roundtable discussion type podcasts. They have podcasts on individual publishers that are specific to those, or team books, or individual characters. So you have a huge selection to choose from. So if you have a moment, and again, and you're interested in finding more related comic book content and podcasts, definitely check out the Comics Podcast Network over at comicspodcast.com. And let's go ahead and jump into the episode. So the whole concept behind these episodes came from a question from an email or either the Facebook group, where someone asked me to update my top 10 list of favorite writers and comic book artists and so forth. And I always thought when I do those, I like to do creative teams because I like to kind of give suggestions when I do those kind of episodes to hopefully that I spark you guys when you listen to kind of think of comics just being, beyond just the basics and kind of the behind the scenes stuff. And so I always would stick in creative teams because sometimes us as comic fans, we'll just read the comics and we might just be following a character or a writer or a particular artist, but not like the whole collaboration. And like sometimes, I think till I really start doing a podcast and I really start going to conventions and like meeting the individuals, like it opened up my mind to more of like the whole collaborative process of making a comic that you have. You have your writer, your artist, you have your colorist, you have your letterer. Some people still use inkers. Some people do, most of their art as far as when it comes to the inks and the actual pencils. If it's not done digitally now, they'll still occasionally have an inker. You don't see it as much now. So it always made me think about that and think about the books or story arcs or runs that I really liked, who made those, and start thinking of the whole collaborative, and then if they worked more than that one time together, what other things they worked on together, and was it as consistent, was it as good? In most cases, it really is. So I came up with this list, this countdown episode based upon some of my favorite creative teams. I tried to put them in as best of an order as possible, and I had to stop myself at some point because it's so hard to think about what was different projects they worked on or a specific run. And I tried to pick longer runs, not just like a 2-issue stint that a team came together on. So here is my countdown list for my favorite creative teams. One that came to mind was Robert Kirkman, Phil Hester, and Andy Parks. They did Irredeemable Ant-Man issues 1 through 12 for Marvel Comics back in 2006 through 2007. It got canceled. It was supposed to be an ongoing series that got canceled 12 issues in. Also, the colorist was Bill Crabtree and letterers Russ Wooten. Russ Wooten has been like Robert Kirkman's pretty much consistent letterer on like pretty much most of this stuff. I've noticed that Robert Kirkman does, Russ Wooten is normally his letterer on whatever said project it is. This was a fun run. I don't know if Robert Kirkman and Phil Hester worked together anymore. I want to say they also did work on the Marvel Team Up series. I think he did a couple of issues of that as well. But it just stood out to me. I had Phil Hester, or I think I at least mentioned him in my favorite artist countdown episode. His style is a throwback and more, I guess you would say a cartoony, not a more photorealistic style. It's more lending itself to more cartoon or traditional comic style. And I just always loved it. This collaboration was good. I love this series. It's an underrated series that kind of Marvel kind of swept under the rug. After Kirkman really left, he freelanced. A lot of people didn't know that Robert Kirkman freelanced quite a bit for Marvel when he first was getting Invincible, The Walking Dead, those books off the ground. He was working for Marvel. He wrote the first Marvel Zombies. He did the Marvel Team Up series, which is a great series that I've talked about over the years. And also this Irredeemable Ant-Man. And even in, I want to say the first Avengers movie, it is a small Easter egg in the movie that the Irredeemable Ant-Man character was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent by the name of Eric O'Grady. And I think he was the guy that Iron Man caught playing the game at the console on the helicarrier. That was Eric O'Grady's character. So he was briefly introduced in the MCU, though they did nothing with the character. Then when they decided to go, of course, with Ant-Man proper, I thought they might do an Irredeemable Ant-Man, but they went with the Hank Pym Ant-Man. But I feel like they infused some characteristics of the Eric O'Grady Ant-Man into not the Hank Pym, the what's the other one? Scott Lang, the Scott Lang character. I felt like some of the shades and the sarcasm and the sense of humor felt a little bit more of the Eric O'Grady Ant-Man. But this is a great series that I really enjoyed, and I just love the art, love the writing. So it's one that I just love the most. Another creative team that I loved their work together is Jeff Johns with Carlos Pacheco and Doug Mahnke. They had a huge run on Green Lantern. They worked. I think they would alternate. The two artists would alternate with him and do certain runs. They did. I'm trying to see how far. They relaunched Green Lantern. The run all together, because they rebooted. They didn't reboot, but they renumbered Green Lantern in the run. They had 1 through 67, which they all collaborated on. Then they renumbered it, started back with a new number 1, and then they continued to collaborate on the first 20 issues. So all in all, their run ran from 2005 to 2013, and just beautiful artwork with great writing. I'm a huge fan of Carlos Pacheco. He was listed as one of my favorite artists. Doug Mahnke. They just had a great run. If you haven't read any of the Jeff John Green Lantern stuff, you owe it to yourself to do so. It's just really good. If you like if you've ever been curious about Green Lantern, I think it's one of this run that I'm listing here is like one of the most defining runs. I read different little pockets of Green Lantern, but I really didn't get a good handle on a character till I came on and read Jeff Johns' run. I mean, if you're going to start anywhere, you probably want to start with oh gosh, what was the mini? He did a mini series. Oh, Green Lantern Rebirth. But I will do a recommended reads or do a reading list type episode where if you want to see more of those, I've been doing recommended reads on. I started doing them on the YouTube channel, and then I also do them as I've been doing them as on the Patreon podcast feed. So if you haven't pledged to the Patreon, that's something that you might want to do. I've been some of the Patrons been asking me for those kind of episodes, so I've been doing recommended read episodes there, and I can where I'm breaking down stuff to where, like, if you're trying to get into certain characters, here's kind of what you need to read. But I've been doing it more also on the YouTube channel as well. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know, in the comments, or shoot me an email and let me know if there's any particular character. I know on one of the last recommended reads videos I put up, I was having a conversation with one of the commenters, and they wanted me to do more like a reading list and kind of drill down. So again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, do so, because I will be doing more videos like that. I guess there'll be recommended I guess I'll call them reading lists, where it tells you, like, if you want to start with a character, here's kind of the de facto order you kind of want to start. I didn't really know it was something you guys wanted. I thought recommended reads would be cool, and it's kind of grown into something where so many people, and this is what I love about the community here with you guys, is that, not everybody, and sometimes I even forget, as open as I try to make everything, everybody's experience with comics is totally different. So I try to do these countdown episodes, recommended reads. I'm doing more reviews, comic book reviews, or trade reviews, but they're on the YouTube channel. So I try to diversify the content, because not everyone's entry point into comics is at the same place, and not every people might know of characters, but they might not know their history or what are the best stories to read. So it's opening up my eyes more to focus more on that. So definitely down the road, in the next few months, between all the movie reviews and so forth, that I want to do more of those suggestive type things going into the summer. So if you guys have free time when you do your vacations and stuff, you have a reading list of good stuff to learn more about characters in different parts of the different comic book universes as well, by giving you as many suggestions as possible. Next creative team that was one of my favorites is Chuck Dixon, Scott McDaniel, Carl Story, Roberta Tways? I think it was Tweez or Tways. I can't remember how it's pronounced. And John Costanza. They were the creative team for Nightwing, the volume 1 of Nightwing over at DC Comics. They collaborated from issues 1 through 40 from 1996 to around 2009. Just a great team. I loved Scott McDaniel's artwork paired with with Chuck Dixon's writing. Carl Story was a really good inker. And they just were all in sync, man. When that book was on and popping, it was on and popping. It always looked good, read good. It was always a treat each month. I remember, I was just really getting into DC heavy, and Nightwing was the first book that fully pulled me into DC as an adult. And I used to tell the story a lot of times previously in the podcast. I lived in a small town in North Carolina, and it was no comic book stores. This was it wasn't necessarily a 1 stoplight town, but it was like a 10 stoplight town at most. And we only had one gas station kind of, I don't know, but because there's so many different chains now, but it was a part of a small chain that was it was this one gas station in the whole town at this point. And we used to walk down to the store in a week, and they had a little spinner rack, but it was mainly Marvel focused. So I never read a ton of Marvel. Most of my DC knowledge as a kid, as a really early kid when I got into comics, were hand-me-down books that I got from my cousins. So I really never fully got immersed, and I would only see them, a couple of, once a year, once every couple of years, and they would hand me down a huge amount of comics, but I would read through them through the next time. I never consistently read DC till I was in my 20s, and I stumbled on to Nightwing, and that was my gateway book to DC as an adult. And this was that book, and it was that one book every month I was picking up. I was going to the comic book store every month, picking this book up. It really opened me up to a larger world. So I always have that nostalgic memory, and it's just every time, even I go back and look at those, I had literally every issue of Nightwing every appearance of Nightwing in comics when I had my physical collection. And I have gone back since, and I sold off my whole Nightwing collection. I've gone back and I purchased this run, issues 1 through 40, digitally through Comixology, because I love these books so much. And I went back and I started reading. I even reviewed and the crazy thing about it is, and I was so irked about this, I bought all the 40 issues because they had never, the trades for the books that came out, they were very low print run, and they never re-released them digitally. So lo and behold, after years and years on Comixology, picking off buying these 40 issues little bit by little bit when they would have sales and stuff, and I would fill in the gaps and stuff. After I get all 40 issues, like boom, I got this run. They then started repackaging the old trades and re-releasing them. And I think like all of those trades are out now. So I got to save me a ton of money and a ton of time if I waited a few years. And now all those books you can get in trades. I did a review on it on the podcast. And I think the first trade is Bloodhaven. And I re-reviewed that on here like a year or so ago. Maybe, yeah, I think it was like a year or so ago. And it's kind of crazy that I was like, because I was impatient. Now all of those trades have been repackaged, re-released, and they're all digital now. But for years and years and years, you couldn't find them. But, what can you say? You get over anxious and you want it, you get it. There you go. Next favorite creative team would be John Ostrander, Jane Dorsma, Dan Parsons, Brad Anderson, and Michael David Thomas for Star Wars Legacy, Dark Horse Comics issues 1 through 50, ran from 2006 to 2010. Great Star Wars book that is, I guess, it's what do they call it? Legends now. I think this was like 100 years after Return of the Jedi. This was a future Star Wars story continuing with the Skywalker family legacy. It was such a good book. Dark Horse put out a lot of good Star Wars books, but once Disney bought Lucasfilm and bought Marvel, it was inevitable that it was going to shift over to Marvel. But this was a classic now. Like, if you want good Star Wars stories, these have been collected. They've collected them like a few times over now, because they did like a 4. I bought these when they first came out too, digitally. They, under Marvel's, they did I think a Legends pairing of them, I want to say. And then later, I think they've done an Epic collection. And I think it might be they collected it like in 2 Epic collections or something like that. Let me look while I'm talking to you guys, because I like to give you some point of reference that's correct. I hate giving out wrong information. It'll like bother me forever because I'm OCD like that. Pay me no mind. Let's just see. Graphic novels. Yes, so they did like a Legends. Yeah, they did a Legends release where it was 3. Let me pull this up all the way. Yeah, so it was collected in 3 Legends paperbacks, and I think that covers all 3 of the all 50 issues. I'm double checking now. I'm pulling it up so I can tell you exactly. Yeah, so these are huge collections. They run about 25 or so bucks. Yeah, so the 3. Yeah, so the first one covers like issues 1 through 19. It was a 0.5 issue in a handbook. The second one covers 20 through 36 and issue 41. I don't know why it's like that. That's weird. And then the last volume collects 37 through 40, 2 through 50. And then it was a mini series that finished off the series, which was Star Wars Legacy War, and that was a 6-issue mini. So these are like whopping like collections, like 400. They're over 400 pages per, but it pretty much collects the whole series in like 3 easy volumes. And then they did an epic collection as well. And let's see. I don't know if these 2 epic collections collect the whole series or not. I'm looking as we speak. No. So, okay. So, yeah. Okay. I thought that might be different. So I guess it's going to be 3 epic collections at some point that finish the series. But you can go either route. I don't know if the presentation is any different between the epic collections and the legacy. They have similar page counts, so I don't know if how the presentation differs. And I'm assuming a 3rd volume would, because it needs to finish off the series. So it's been collected, so you can get it hard copy, digital. Like I said, if you go the epic collection route, the 3rd volume, that would finish the whole series with the included mini series that finished it off. It's kind of like an epilogue to it. That's not out yet. But if you do the Legends version, is all 3 volumes have been out. That's the 3 that I bought when they first switched over and they got the rights. They put that out like immediately, and I picked those up because I didn't have those digitally anymore. Next on my list is Punisher. It was a 16-issue run from 2011 to 2012 with Greg Rucka, Marco Cicchetto. Colorist was Matt Hollingsworth, and lettering done by Joe Caramagna. Love this run. I'm a huge Greg Rucka fan, as you guys know from my favorite writers episode. I'm a huge fan of Greg Rucka. I've read him through. I haven't read everything he's ever written. As far as when it comes to comics, I've read a ton of his work, and I loved his take on the Punisher. I wish this run would have went longer than what it did. Him and Marco Cicchetto, that they were a good combination. I like Marco Cicchetto's artwork, and I love this Punisher artwork especially. But I love anything that he draws. He's a really good artist. But I love this run. I felt like it was too short. It was a 16-issue run. Then he did. Did he work on that? Because I remember he broke his hand. I don't know. It was the 16-issue run. Then they had a prologue kind of epilogue kind of mini series called Punisher Warzone. I can't remember if Cicchetto worked on that or not, because the book had got canceled, or they ended their run. I think Rucka was actually just leaving Marvel at the time, but I think Cicchetto had broke his hand or something, and it was either he started it or did covers for it, then somebody else did the artwork, the interiors. I can't remember, so don't hold me to it. But great collaboration. I would love to see them work on something else again in the future. I don't think to my knowledge, they haven't worked together again since this Punisher run, but I would like to see it though. Next, I have Grant Morrison, Howard Porter, and John Dell. Their JLA run from issues 1 through 41. This was the JLA book that really put the JLA on the map. Far as the Justice League had been real stagnant. Grant Morrison came on, said he had a new take on the characters back in 97 and relaunched with like the original 7 characters. He did this epic 40 some odd issue run. The book ran from 1997 to 2006, but his run, different writers and stuff came on. It wasn't as popular. Like, this was why we got the Justice League animated series and Justice League Unlimited and all that. It was because Grant Morrison coming on the book and the popularity and the energy he generated working on the book for this run that really put them on the map and started really revitalized the Justice League as being a top tier focus for DC and a top tier team, because it was all these offshoot teams, and with everybody and their mother had been a Justice League member at some point. It really reestablished the brand of the Justice League in comics and really brought so many people to the book. This was like, I remember, man, like this book, if you didn't get it the week it came out, it was hard to get those back issues. And this was in the late 90s going into the early 2000s, we didn't have all the different, all these books that we have printed and coming out, every month now. So it was like print runs were, like even for these books that were like considered high because they were like the highest selling books. Like if you snoozed, you lost on like the Justice League book. That's how like it would fly off the shelves. It was kind of crazy. Next on my list, I have the collaboration on Amazing Spider-Man issues 30 through 58, and it was J. Michael Straczynski and John Romita Jr. with the inker Scott Hanna. This was just one of the most beautiful runs of Spider-Man in recent memory. And it's a funny thing because I always talk about this story about how when I was real young, I could not stand John Romita Jr.'s artwork at all. It bothered me so much when I was a kid, like 10, 11. I was like, oh, his artwork is so ugly. I used to hate it. And, they did the Thor book. And I remember seeing the cover that he did the promo art when they were relaunching Thor after Heroes Reborn. And I just thought it was the most beautiful thing. And I fell in love with John Romita Jr.'s artwork. Now, I do admit from time to time, depending if he has taken time or if he's rushed, his art, I can still have a love-hate relationship with his art. More love than hate nowadays, though. But this run just was so stunning. I mean, I've always loved Spider-Man as a character, but this run they did, what was the character, Maljourn or whatever, that whole storyline that they were doing, his pencil just spoke to me in like a certain kind of way. And they have these collected, and I need to get those because I like this run. I just love so much. I was like heavy into Spider-Man at the time, and this was like my last real time reading Spider-Man during this run. They ended up renumbering it back to the regular numbering. Then after Romita Jr. left, I think Mike Deodato Jr. took over the book, and it kind of wavered after then. And then they did Brand New Day, and I fell off with Spider-Man, and I really haven't read Spider-Man consistently since. This was like the last real run I was really so just in to everything Spider-Man. I was reading all the Spider-Man books at the time, and this run like what solidified that. And it's just like the artwork is just so good, the writing's so good, the storyline. They undid a lot of stuff that JMS did on his run on Spider-Man, but he did some really cool stuff that really try to grow out the mythos of Spider-Man that over the years got done away with. But that was really different, and like it just everything blended so perfectly. You had a perfect tone and rhythm to it. Next, I can't have a list of favorite collaborations and not have this group of individuals on here. This is Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Danny Mickey, and the whole team that was doing Batman from the New 52 run from issue 1 to issue 51, DC Comics from 2011 to that run ended 2017 now? It was like 2017, 2016, something like that. Just so good. I mean, Greg Capullo's artwork, Scott Snyder. I mean, it was like this had became like my definitive like Batman like collab right here, and it's been so many that I've enjoyed over the years. But the body of work that they both committed to, just like they were going to be on this book, and they did such a huge run. It told so many great stories, and I'm still not finished reading the whole run. I have it all. Like I bought all the issues, and I'm about like halfway through the run because I'll get into it and I'll knock out a lot of issues. Then I'll fall back because different stuff I need to review for shows or for content I'm doing. But I got to finish this run at some point and finish the sitting. I'll finish reading it. They just told so many great stories, and it just looked amazing. It read amazing. just the whole theme of this whole collaboration. It's just beautiful books, beautiful comic books. Really makes you focus on comic books as an art, not just a form of entertainment, but an art form. Next, I have the Walking Dead collaboration. Robert Kirkman, Charlie Adlard. They've been working together from around issue 7 to current day. The model of consistency is all I can say. They don't have delays in books. They don't bring on a ton of guest artists. Like Charlie Adlard is like rock solid. Like he's a rock star. I mean, because he's in there with Kirkman, pumping out that book month in, month out, always on time, rarely delayed. I mean, I think what they did the one event where did the books come out weekly or bi-weekly, something like that, and he was still drawing that joint and getting it out there. So like they working together just as like peas and carrots, as Forrest Gump used to say. It just goes together. Next collaboration that I love, one of my favorite collaborations, is Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Risso, 100 Bullets, issues 1 through 100. Now that's a body of work. 100 issues. They ran from 1999 to 2009 on 100 Bullets. Just if you haven't read 100 Bullets, there's a Vertigo title. It was just a DC imprint. Kind of a creator-owned collaboration kind of thing. Great book. I haven't read all of it yet. I've read, it's about 13 trades. I've read 8 or 9 of them. And if you go through the backlog, and yes, shout out to my man, I am still working on that episode list page so you guys can find this stuff easily. Since the search mechanic doesn't always work with all that, because I forget about the point that as of this episode is 420 episodes of the podcast. So when I reference stuff that I've done like 10 years ago, you're probably not going to easily find it. So I'm working on, it's just going to be a page literally with each episode listed and episode title. So you can just scroll through that one page and click on a link and it'll take you to the page. It's been slow going because I've been so focused on getting out content for all the different platforms. So website maintenance is like the last thing on the list. I've been working on it, but I haven't completed it yet. But I will get that together. But I actually have reviewed every single trade that I've read for 100 Bullets up until this point. And I think the last one I read was 8 or maybe 9. I can't remember. But they recently had a sale not too long ago, and I got the last trades that I needed. So it's just cutting out time to read those last 4 trades to fully read the series. But everything I read, I have totally loved in this book. And they collaborate on a few other things that I forgot to list here that I've enjoyed. But they're a good pairing when they're together. Next on the list, I have the collaboration of Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale with Richard Starkings as the letterer. They've done multiple collaborations. They've done, and I talk about them all the time. They've done Superman for All Seasons, Batman The Long Halloween, Batman Dark Victory, Catwoman When in Rome, Challengers of the Unknown, Captain America White, Daredevil Yellow, Hulk Gray, Spider-Man Blue, Wolverine Gambit Victims as well. I think that's everything they've done. I feel like I'm leaving something off, and I might be, but those are just some of the things that they collaborated on. Just, again, a perfect pairing of writer and artist. They have the body of work. So all of these I've read, most of these. I read Superman for All Seasons, Batman The Long Halloween, Batman Dark Victory, Daredevil Yellow, Hulk Gray, Spider-Man Blue. I recently found this. They re-released this on digital, and I just picked up the Wolverine and Gambit Victims one. I had always heard about it, but never could find it when I was doing physical comics because I owned all these like trades and hardcovers of these stories. And I could never, I looked for years for that book. I could never find it. They released it digitally. I picked it up a couple of months back. So I finally got it, and I need to read it because I think this was one of their very first collaborations, this Wolverine Gambit one. That or maybe the Challengers of the Unknown, which I still need to pick that one up. I never read that one as well. But I've loved the ones I have read. They're like, all of them are like, all the ones I read are pretty much like instant classics. Like if you're a comics fan, at some point you need to read those books. Like that's how good they are. And last but not least on the list for me is going to be Walt Simonson with letterer John Workman. Walt Simonson did a run on Thor, which is one of the de facto runs of the character, where he was a writer and artist. He did issues 337 through 354, 357 through 367, and his runs ran from 1977 through 1986. He's listed as one of my favorite writers, and he's listed as one of my favorite artists. It was just great, like the output he was doing as a writer as well as an artist. He was working on multiple books at the time too, and he did stints where he wrote issues and did art on some. He also had a run on Fantastic Four where he did a run as writer artist, and I think he drew, and John Byrne did the writing. And then I think Byrne left, and then he did a short stint on there where he was both writer and artist as well. Yeah, but just stunning. Like if you want to read Thor, just look up the Walter Simonson Visionaries series, and it's like I think like 5 or 6 volumes of them. Get on that. Like if you want to really get down with like Thor, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Oh my gosh. That was my jam growing up. Like Fantastic Four, Walt Simonson, John Byrne, Fantastic Four, Thor, later on, because Walt Simonson collabed with his wife, and they launched X Factor. Those were such my jams. Like when I was, how old was I? 11, 12-ish, around that time. They were like my sweet spot. Man, I love those books so much. So yeah, and he was killing it as, like I said, writer and the artist on it, which you don't see that much nowadays. Not to the effect that he did, because he was like the top on both sides of the game. You see certain people try it nowadays, and they're not like considered by many as a top writer and the top artist like he was. He was like the go-to guy, and on both sides of the coin, and that's why he was doing it so much, because people knew they could count on him and that he was killing the game like that. And that's like why he's just one of my favorite people, like inspiration in comics, because he just was doing it like straight up, just killing it. That's my list of my favorite creative teams or creative collaborations, I guess you can say. I hope I gave you some recommendations that might, or help you think about, like, hey, you look at some of your books that are your favorite books. Who are the people that worked on them? Did they work on other stuff together? Like, to kind of spark you to do more research. And, like, once you find the sweet spot of certain stuff you like, explore it more and see if it's more was done that you can check out, read, explore, and find that you like. That's how you, like, grow within the hobby of comics collecting, is just looking at, hey, I start doing that. So like if I find a writer or a creative team, hey, did they do any more work together? If it was a writer, what did he do outside of him with this particular company? And it takes you down a rabbit hole, and you find some really good stuff and good books that maybe are not because it's not as well known because it's an independent or smaller publisher, but are like fantastic stories. So it just helps expand and diversify you as a comics reader. So that's why I like doing these episodes, to hopefully I give you guys some insight, or help push you in a direction to look at the hobby more openly, outside of what the big publishers kind of push out at us. But that's all I really have for you guys. As always, if you haven't already, check out the Patreon. Consider becoming a Patreon contributor. You get episodes early. Whenever I get episodes done in advance, you get a couple of days early before they hit the actual podcast feed. You get the actual Comic Book Savant Extra podcast feed as well, which is another weekly podcast that I do specifically for the Patreon contributors that you can only get there. And it's totally different content. It's not what they call recycled content. It's totally separate for what I do here, that you'll only hear those episodes on there. And other different bonuses, discounts, all those kind of things. So it's really something worth checking out if you can. I know not everyone can contribute, to the Patreon, but you guys have helped the channel grow. If you can, consider it. Check it out. Just go to patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. You'll see the different tiers. There's different tiers ranging from $1 to $7 is the top tier. I'm not trying to break anybody, but you definitely, and I try to make it a value added proposition. So I try to make it worth your while for contributing to the Patreon, that you get something worth it at every tier, from that $1 tier all the way to the $3, $5, and $7, that you get something worthwhile. And it's been going well, and again, I don't have a ton of Patreons, but again, hopefully you guys will, check it out. And if you can, you will. If you can't, I understand. Just, you retweeting, there's other things you can do that help support the show as well. So again, if you can't, become a patron, you can also, I have a donate link on the website. You can do a one-time donation through PayPal. You can also leave a review on iTunes. I did get a review earlier that really touched my heart, so I'm going to read that before we close out the episode. And I forget to ask about that stuff too. But always, if you can, leave a review on iTunes. That's always cool. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you do, subscribe. And if you check out a video, leave a comment, leave feedback, send feedback. That's another thing you can do. You can always drop me an email. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you feel like I can improve on, or something, a recommendation of something you want me to cover in an upcoming episode. And I'm willing to do that. So, it's other ways, like I said, outside of just, hey, give me your money. If you can, that's great, because again, it no longer has any kind of sponsorship. So I really do depend on you guys. Like, whatever you guys do in that way helps me a ton in keeping this going and keep it growing. It's grown, like, it's crazy. I talked about it for years, doing YouTube and trying to, add more content on for Patreon to bring in more people on that, that side of it, and really doing it now. And, so it's like, I do these, these weekly episodes, I do weekly episodes for that. And then I do weekly videos. So, anything you do across the board, from sharing content, retweeting content, supporting financially, leaving reviews, all that helps grow it all. And it's been growing, in just, not even 2 years, almost, I guess it'll be almost 2 years soon, that I've really been creating content on YouTube, that I went from like no subscribers to we're like the 260 mark, which is amazing, because it was slow out of the gate. I don't have thousands yet, but we're getting there and we're working towards that. It's with your guys' help that those things become possible. Reviews and retweeting, giving feedback, so I know things that I'm trying, you guys are liking or disliking, like, oh, let me cut that because you guys are not enjoying it. Those things, that collaboration, that interaction we have with one another goes a long way, more than I think sometimes you guys think that it does. It affects me in like a profound way. But before I go, I did want to read this one review. Did get one last month on iTunes. It was the first iTunes review I got in a while. And it reads as follows. It was like, hello, I found your podcast only a few weeks ago, but it has become my new obsession. I have been going through the archives on the Comic Book Podcast Network, and every episode is a treat. Your passion, as well as your top 100 trades list, has pushed me to stop procrastinating and getting into comics. Stop procrastinating, if I can talk, had pushed me to stop procrastinating, getting into comics, and just do it. I recently signed up for Comixology and I am reading my first book, Batman Year One. I really appreciate your work and look forward to every new episode. Thanks. That does so much for me, guys. Like sometimes, y'all know I get emotional sometimes. Sometimes I will read a comment or email and I'll be like on the verge of tears. It's really funny. The older I get, the more sensitive I used to get. And I just remember like as a kid, like I just was like the hardest kid. Like I never cried. And like I cry on a drop of a dime now, man. I swear. I'm like so weak. I'd be doing episodes and I'd be crying. I'd be like, well, I'd be like so emotional. It'd be funny because it's like, yo, where did that come from? It's like, I wasn't trying to cry and I just break down. But anyway, it's mad love and it goes so far. Like when I get those emails or I get those comments, like it keeps me going. It's like fuel. Like it's like a straight shot of adrenaline, like in my vein, like, got to do more content, got to keep it going because that's what I do it for. I do it to hopefully inspire you guys how you have inspired me, make you as passionate as I am about the hobby, and help direct you in any way possible and be that resource that you guys come to look to expand your love of the hobby. That's what it's about. That's why the tagline has changed to "For the Love of Comics," and it's just for the love of comics, which I do it. For the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon. Love of the hobby. That's what it's about. That's why the tagline has changed to "For the Love of Comics," and it's just for the love of comics, which I do it for the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon. My first book, Batman Year One. I really appreciate your work and look forward to every new episode. Thanks. That does so much for me, guys. Like sometimes, y'all know I get emotional sometimes. Sometimes I will read a comment or email and I'll be like on the verge of tears. It's really funny. The older I get, the more sensitive I used to get. And I just remember like as a kid, like I just was like the hardest kid. Like I never cried. And it's like I cry on a drop of a dime now, man. I swear. I'm like so weak. I'd be doing episodes and I'd be crying. I'd be like, well, I'd be like so emotional. It'd be funny because it's like, yo, where did that come from? It's like, I wasn't trying to cry, and I just break down. But anyway, it's mad love, and it goes so far. Like when I get those emails or I get those comments, like it keeps me going. It's like fuel. Like it's like a straight shot of adrenaline, like in my vein. Like, oh, got to do more content. Got to keep it going because that's what I do it for. I do it to hopefully inspire you guys how you have inspired me. Make you as passionate as I am about the hobby, and help direct you in any way possible and be that resource that you guys come to look to expand your love of the hobby. That's what it's about. You know, that's why the tagline has changed to "For the Love of Comics," and it's just for the love of comics, which I do it, for the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon. Love of the hobby. That's what it's about. You know, that's why the tagline has changed to "For the Love of Comics," and it's just for the love of comics, which I do it, for the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon. For the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon. love of the hobby. That's what it's about. That's why the tagline has changed to "For the Love of Comics," and it's just for the love of comics, which I do it. For the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon. My first book, Batman Year One. I really appreciate your work and look forward to every new episode. Thanks. That does so much for me. Guys, sometimes, y'all know I get emotional sometimes. Sometimes I will read a comment or email and I'll be on the verge of tears. It's really funny. The older I get, the more sensitive I used to get. And I just remember as a kid, I just was the hardest kid. I never cried. And I cry on a drop of a dime now, man. I swear. I'm so weak. I'd be doing episodes and I'd be crying. I'd be what? I'd be so emotional. It'd be funny because it's yo, where did that come from? It's I wasn't trying to cry, and I just break down. But anyway, it's mad love, and it goes so far. When I get those emails or I get those comments, it keeps me going. It's like fuel. It's like a straight shot of adrenaline, in my vein. Got to do more content. Got to keep it going, because that's what I do it for. I do it to hopefully inspire you guys how you have inspired me, make you as passionate as I am about the hobby, and help direct you in any way possible and be that resource that you guys come to look to expand your love of the hobby. That's what it's about. That's why the tagline has changed to "For the Love of Comics," and it's just for the love of comics, which I do it. For the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon. Love of the hobby. That's what it's about. That's why the tagline has changed to "For the Love of Comics," and it's just for the love of comics, which I do it. For the love of you guys that I do it as well, and for your love of comics. It's all about our journey that we take together in this hobby and enjoying it to the fullest and spreading it out to as many people and making them understand that it's not an exclusive thing being a fan of comics or being a comics fan or being a comic book nerd. It's all inclusive. No one is excluded from this hobby unless we make it that way. So we need to make it more accessible so more people can get into it, so it will be there for our future generations, our kids' kids, or our kids' kids. And that's the only way, is by making it more accessible, not exclusive and excluding people. But I will get off my soapbox for now. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant Podcast, and I will see you guys next week for another episode. You guys have a good week and take care. Talk to you soon.